Morning. Please be seated. My name is Jory Mickelson, and I am a lay preacher visiting this Sunday from Christ Church in Blaine, Washington. Thank you all for allowing me to speak, and Reverend Shelley for inviting me. I wanted to let you know that the other Christ Church is praying for you this morning. As one of them sagely remarked, they've had 6 years to get used to me, and you'll only have about 8 minutes. So I don't want to take up too much of your time this morning. It's a busy day with the start of the academic year at UW, and students are having move-in day in the dorms. And I'm sure some of you also want to get home for your other Sabbath activity of watching the Seahawks. But whether the new academic year or a sporting event or even going to our jobs on Mondays, I'd like to talk about what they all have in common for us: our desire to succeed. We in Western culture are driven. We think we can push and push and push our way into being winners, being successful, being the best. It is a symptom of our age, from unregulated corporate greed to the nonstop feeling that we have to be doing something or accomplishing something in our spare time. Even our hobbies and the things that give us pleasure are often weighed against crossing items off a to-do list or figuring out how to make our activities more valuable sometime or to monetize them. Think of Etsy, how we aren't alone. Looking at the reading from Proverbs this morning, we can all see how exhausting it is to be an ideal woman in the Old Testament. The author of Proverbs spent 21 verses saying, and another way that you could best perform as a wife is, sometimes it feels as not much has changed, does it? The unrealistic expectations imposed on women in our culture is an important topic, and I want to acknowledge that. But that said, I don't want to get too far off track this morning. I bring up Proverbs to illustrate how our ideas and our expectations are to compete, to perform, to accomplish more. Or as Proverbs so eloquently puts it, many women have done excellently, but you have surpassed them all. What does contemporary culture have to say about success? Ambition is the path to success. Persistence is the vehicle you arrive in. Or success is getting what you want. We worship success. We believe that we get what we deserve, what we work hard for, or what we are worthy of. It is hard for us as Western people to think in any other way, and we carry this mental attitude and our love of competition into religion and into our spiritual lives. We want to attain some concrete message from a Sunday sermon or from a meeting at church. We want to achieve an improved morality or learn a new prayer technique that will make us into superior spiritual people. We want to level up. But this need for success, this endless hunger for reward and accomplishment, keeps us from the transformational experience called grace, keeps us moving in absolutely the wrong direction that Jesus is calling us to in the Gospels. What I love about the Gospel of Mark is that he always shows the apostles and the disciples of Jesus getting it wrong. They mess up. They have to relearn and relearn and relearn the same messages in a different way. They are afraid. They don't want to appear stupid. They fight amongst themselves for status and prestige, yet all the while they continue to be disciples of Jesus. They do their best to follow him in his teachings, and this gives me hope. As Richard Rohr, the Franciscan priest and brother, says, most often we don't pay attention to our inner task until we have some kind of failure in our outer task, until the wheels come off. We work our butts off, exhaust ourselves, and push everyone else away and still not get what we were chasing after in the first place. In my own life, this can feel a bit too close to home. I've spent the past 2 years discerning whether or not I was called to the priesthood. And there are a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of paperwork to be filled out, meetings to attend, committees to form, and reports to give, and I completed them all. I checked all the boxes off my list, and I wanted it badly. Perhaps that is the most important part of it all. I deeply desired to respond to the call of God in my heart, and I wanted that call to be one of the priesthood. So I started making plans. I started daydreaming about the future. I started forming my mental image of myself into who I would someday become. And we've all done this. Whether we are dreaming for our future life as a person in a romantic relationship, or as a parent, or in a future career, or if we're a working person, what we will do with our real lives once we retire. This is normal. It's natural to the human condition. So I came to the end of my discernment period this summer, and the final vote was no. Not that I didn't have a possible vocation, but no, I'm not ready to move forward in the process. No, that I still have some work to do. No, that the idea of who I wanted to become is not going to be happening on my timetable. Possibly not at all. And it threw me. It completely disoriented me. My whole image of myself and my whole image of the Holy One were shaken. It has not been easy, and I do not feel like a success. Everything in me wants to drop the subject of what happened in Jory's discernment process and never bring it up again. It is embarrassing for me to admit to people that I did all the right things and I didn't end up with the desired results. Where in our own lives do we feel like we have lost? Where in our lives do we know that we have failed? Where in our lives are we ashamed because we did not live up to our own or others' expectations, whether they were realistic or not? It is in these very places of darkness that we may first begin to learn of and receive the transformational grace that Christ promises us. Religion, at its best, helps us to recognize that we are blind, that we do not know how to see, that we must be taught. A spiritual path helps us let go of illusions, of our prejudice, of our preconceived ideas, so that we may be present to what actually is. This is why so many spiritual masters say with Jesus in one voice, "Be awake." Jesus reminds us that if the eye is healthy in Luke, your whole body will be filled with light. Experiencing the radical grace of the loving one is entering into a different world. It is learning to let go, to stop doing, and to start noticing. We can't earn the Holy One's love. It is already and always here for us. We cannot get the Merciful One to like us any better or pay more attention to us. We cannot flatter the Beloved. We cannot compete with our neighbor to win a higher status with Jesus. In our culture of winner takes all, we have no idea what to do with an abundance of the Blessed One's love for us. There is no first or last place. Even the disciples who heard Jesus teach them on a daily basis missed this. They lived with and were taught by and ate the same food as the Son of God daily, and they still couldn't understand what the Holy One was calling them to. That the Beloved's one love for us simply is. And this is grace that is so antithetical, so upside down, so opposite to the way in which most of us live our day-to-day lives that we almost always doubt it, have trouble believing in it, and refuse to accept that we can simply rest in the arms of a loving God. What a relief. What a terrifying proposition. James asks us, those conflicts and disputes among you, where do they come from? And he tells us, do they not come from your cravings that are at war within you? You want something and do not have it. You covet something and cannot obtain it. And yet we remain blind. We have the love of the merciful one with us at every moment. We have the peace that passes all understanding available to us in every situation, and we cannot see it. So we do not ask. We do not receive it because we are entirely caught up in our own competitiveness, our own drives, and our own mindsets. So what am I to do now that all of my plans have fallen through? That a dream of mine that I had a particular timetable for will not happen? What happens to each of us after a personal or emotional disappointment strikes? We learn to let go. Slowly but surely, we might learn to rest in the arms of the Holy One, but we resist. Love that cannot be earned and is freely given is humiliating to our egos. We have no control over the love and mercy of God. And maybe in 12-step recovery, this is why they are so successful. Because when someone enters into the rooms, they are welcomed with a radical abundance of welcome. They are accepted no matter how badly the wheels have come off, and they are embraced. We have absolutely no control over the love and mercy of God. We can only receive it or refuse it. Only the grace of the loving one can move us beyond our mindset of reward and punishment in which most of us lose out. Only the abundant mercy of the beloved can move us into a new way of thinking about and living in the world. Our collect today calls us not to be anxious about earthly things, even as we are placed in a life in which all that is around us will eventually pass away. And daily, I fail. Daily, you may fail too. If we aren't careful, we can turn anything we attempt into a game of one-upmanship. Good, better, best. If you meditate for 5 minutes today, why not 10 tomorrow? If you grew your church membership by 10% last year, why not 15% this year? All this need to always improve, this need to succeed at all times in all places will eventually kill us. Our churches may end up full of people, but our hearts will be empty of the loving one. The love of the merciful one does not come and go, granted to some and refused to others. The love of the Holy One is unconditional, which means it is unconditional. It is the force that holds the whole world together, this world and the one to come. Let us do our best here in the midst of our lives to learn how to pause, to learn how to rest, to learn how to let go, and maybe little by little to see, so that when we come to the end of our lives, we will have learned how to rest in the love of the beloved. That way, when we meet Jesus face to face, he will not have to ask us, "What were you arguing about on your way?" Amen.